I think the first 5 minutes of this interview should have been done without any talking so we could just listen to the birds. Oh my goodness, what a fabulous place. We are in the town of Schuyler Falls on Shingle Street.
Yeah.
To start an interview that we've anticipated for years and years and years with our good friend Lita Kelly. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Finally that year came and the day came.
You know, it seems like I've lived your life vicariously by talking to you and your husband Dave at the press about this piece of property and the anticipation when you first came here and all the crazy things you went through building your house and getting this place ready.
Oh, we did. We had to use up some money from a former sale of a house that had no closets and no windows and use it up by tax time. And so we hired the Craig brothers to come out and help us. And Will Craig designed the house pretty much to what we wanted spec-wise, even to the lay of the land so that I could put my equipment in the right closet immediately as I came in the door. But it was an interesting twist. We almost thought we weren't going to get it done. But when they came and zoomed in at the last minute, it was finished with touches that none of us ever would have thought would ever have been there. They were so creative. They'd say, oh, I like this space. Let's put in a window seat that opens up so that you can store your magazines or whatever in there. How about a nice little towel cubby? You know, just little things that they knew a woman like me would love.
This is the kind of house that many people watching our little corner today would dream about. What year did you actually move in?
We moved in 1990. So we
Come on,
yeah,
13
we got it started.
years ago?
Yeah, we started.
Seems like last Tuesday.
Oh, actually it does. And David and I, as of last Wednesday, now are 15 years married. So the marriage, then the house, and we survived the tension of that. So we knew that we were made for each other. That's how you find out.
I'm so glad you invited us out here today because I love the North Country countryside. I spend a lot of time writing about it, talking about it, and of course, ad nauseum on this program, we talk about why we love Clinton County and the North Country. And if after our viewers see this program, they don't understand why.
It's so beautiful. I write some of my best music riding here.
Just wonderful.
The smell of cedar. I have the birds that wake me up in the morning. I shut them out for a little while, then I come out, grab the paper and say
early,
hello.
Don't they? About 3:30.
Usually 4:30 here. They're very kind to me. They're beautiful, all kinds. A couple of years ago, I came home from a healing mass, and drove in, and I thought, you know, things seem like they're going to go so right. And I drove in, and there was a whippoorwill right there. And it watched me come in, and it didn't move. And I got into the driveway, came out of the car, stood there, and we watched each other for a while. And it stayed there, and it was singing to me. It was beautiful until a car came by, and then it zoomed right by and went around the house. But it was so wonderful. Things like that you don't forget.
This is a fabulous piece of property. May I ask you how you came by choosing this place to live?
This land and land down the way until the Indian land, and on the other side, about 250 acres belong to my family. Good old Tim Kelly came over in 1850. We have a deed from 1850. We have all these wonderful, wonderful documents that show what happened. They bought a piece, and then my great uncle Mike and his mother loved buying more land because that land was power, and land was one way that these poor people could have some kind of wealth. And so they'd buy another piece, and then they would buy another piece. And of course, once in a while, they got foreclosed on because the money wasn't there, but they'd get it back. And so it came in the family that way. My father let my brother Hugh live out here for a while before he got shipped out to Ohio. And when he left and I needed a place to stay and to build so quickly, Dad said, well, I happen to know a place where there's a well and a septic already. How would you like that? So we bought it from him for a wonderful
we'll have to
family
think
price.
About that for a long time.
Yeah, we paid him back for the well, the septic, and I think he sold it to us for $100 an acre, something like that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You have like 38
about 35 acres, and
Looks like you mow about 5 of them.
David
Up
mows
and
anywhere
down the
from
hills.
5.5 to 7.5 hours worth of mowing.
You have got to be kidding.
It keeps him in great shape.
You could own a goat.
We thought about that. A
Oh,
herd.
my
A herd. We'll put him
goodness.
back there.
And this is, like I said, rather what you might call an undulating piece of property. Up and down and trees
Up and
around
down
in the bushes. But you know what? It looks like a national preserve.
When we came here, it was all, it had been old potato farms. And
Oh, it
then,
had?
yeah, they actually grew potatoes to make a living. And I guess it did pretty well for those, but it hasn't done very well for my garden, which used to be over there and just doesn't exist anymore. But it changed a lot. It was sumacs all over the place.
sumac.
And so we just happened to have neighbors that were coming in across the way, and man had a brush hog, beautiful machine, and I went over and said, is there any chance we could hire you?
With that charming smile
Oh,
of
please,
yours.
that and money. And so he came and he brush hogged this whole area here, and up the hill, David just started pulling till we decided we liked what it looked like. We wanted to leave some for privacy and actually for a sound buffer. We're in like a bowl, and the sounds from all over are they're just magnified.
You
So,
saw
worth it.
that when I stood here, I was mesmerized. I'm one of those people who believes that every moment of our lives is precious because we don't know how many moments we have left.
No, we don't.
So when I stand in a place like this, it's awesome to me. And I'm reverent about it because I'm so pleased that I'm able to stand here and drink in those smells and those sounds and all those things. The first, we were driving up the road, and Calvin said, Lita told me they had a big stone wall.
Oh, yes.
And I drove up and saw this big stone wall that's, 7 or 8 feet wide.
Yeah.
And it's fabulous. What is the genesis of this stone wall?
When my forebears actually bought the different properties, they started clearing it for animals. And there are animal pastures way back there, more over here, stone walls hidden in the woods that you wouldn't expect. And so someone started it here to help clear out this area. And later on, my brother Hugh, when he was here, he started shaping a wall here. It was a lot more condensed, and it was very hard to get a car in. So later on, David, being the artist that he really is, he just took it apart and put it back here, and started. He just started from here, going like this, from one end to the other, and he works on it every year. It's not done, it's not finished.
You know,
So
you
it's
look
more do-
you look at stone walls, and as our viewers and my former radio listeners and those who read my column kindly every week know I love stone walls.
Oh, yes.
I have a special attraction to stone walls, and while I was researching the column, I drove my wife crazy. There's one, and we'd stop the car, and there's another one. Gordy, there's 40 million stone walls. Do we have to look at every one? Yep. You have to get the mood, you know.
Finding the perfect stone is really intriguing. He's dug under. He's gone down the other line. He pulls them out, checks them out, see what scope is under there. Pulls his great big crowbar in there and rolls these things up the
That was a
up the
nice
hill.
thing you did to buy him a long crowbar. I thought that was a really
That was a
tender,
Father's Day gift.
tender Father's Day
Yes,
gift to
oh,
give your
yes.
husband a big, long pole to move the stones
You
with.
never know when you can use a crowbar that's that big. So I just thought it'd be practical. I got a wheelbarrow. He got a crowbar.
I love it. I want to pause for just a moment. I'm told that I don't mention the names of the person I'm interviewing nearly enough on this program because Lita and I have known each other for such a long time, but many of our viewers are going to be introduced to one of the most creative, wonderful people that I've ever met in my lifetime today. Her name is Lita Kelly. She's done so many things, I'm not even going to give you a preview until we start the camera again. Don't shut your television set off because we're going to spend a long time talking with Lita Kelly. If it weren't for black flies and mosquitoes,
Yes.
I could set a cot up here or just a very large lounge chair and a bag of books. And
just
this is
sit.
what they call nirvana.
Oh, this is it.
I just love it. We've just come down around 30 degrees in the circle behind the house, and we're looking at your little grotto here. You want to tell me
Yes.
about it?
Well, actually, I had a statue of Mary that came from my son's family's home. When they had to get rid of the home, I took the statue, and ended up, I didn't have a place to put it, so I had it in my fireplace in the place I used to live. And one morning before Jay went to school, I had heated my living room with a wood stove, and I had a chimney fire. And of course, the firemen came. There wasn't anything serious. And that night, before I went to bed, I was standing talking on the telephone, and the statue was still there right next to the wood stove. And I looked around and I said, it turned. It was facing
Oh boy,
the
here we
wood
go.
stove.
You're gonna do it to
And
me
this
again.
girl on the other end of the line said, what turned? And I told her what happened. I said, there's got to be something wrong with my stove. I'm going to go take a look. And I went over and I looked at the chimney pipes, and they hadn't been screwed together. The chimney pipes were open in the back. It had been bent by the fire. Had I gone and lit the fire and gone to bed, we would burn the house down and heaven knows what else. So I owe
telling
that
us
lady. Yes, I owe that lady.
Isn't that incredible? As you know, I love stories like that. You know, we don't talk about it often. Calvin and I, as you do, have a deep religious faith. And I'm also interested in things like that happen that are out of the ordinary to prove to people that miracles do happen.
They do.
And I also like to write ghost stories of spirits who come back to talk to people and reassure them or give them messages like has happened to you this time. So
yeah.
and we know that you have a deep religious faith. You've been connected with the church, and you've probably written a few songs with religious overtones.
Yeah, one that I haven't done in years called "Get Down on Your Knees and Thank God."
Oh,
We forget. We ask and we ask and we ask, but we forget to say thanks. So every once in a while now, I'll just toss one.
You know, without beating a dead horse, and we understand that there are people who don't subscribe to the same philosophy that we do. And I wrote not a column, but a speech to give to a wonderful group of RSVP seniors a few days ago, and the subject was simply happiness. And until you stop to think about what makes you happy, writing the words made me grateful for just having to think what makes me happy. And one of the things that makes me happy is being tolerant of other people's points of view. And you know, as many of our listeners know, my father was a Methodist minister.
Right.
And my mother was very close-minded. She had her view of the world, the previous world and the future world, and there was no way you would ever change her. My father, on the other hand, and I had some pretty cockamamie ideas when I was a young man, but I would sit down and say to my dad, listen, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think of this? And instead of saying, no, God, it says, or no, Gordy, it says in a certain book of the Bible, here's the way it's supposed to be, he would listen to me. And he would say, I got to think about that.
Oh.
And we would come back and debate for hours in a wonderful father and son kind of way. And that's one of the things I remember about my dad, who was tolerant of everybody's point of view. So
I like I got to think about that.
yeah, I got to think about that.
That is really
instead of just
smart.
closing his mind to that. And I was thinking this morning driving to work about that's one of the things I appreciate about my dad. I think about a lot of things when I get up in the morning, like, wow, my feet hit the
we're
floor,
here.
my head doesn't hurt,
No.
things are okay. And the first thing I do is to say that little prayer of gratitude by saying, thanks for all the things that happened yesterday and for whatever there is we're in for today.
Yeah.
In advance, thanks a lot. And
That's true.
I've never been let down by being having gratitude for anything people do nice for me. So that's a good point to make.
Well, I like the fact that in spite of the song that I wrote, you don't have to get down on your knees and thank God. You can do it anywhere. And a casual relationship with the Creator is a lot more comfortable. You know?
Isn't it?
Yes, it is. So I just throw something at him, a zinger once in a while. Hey, what'd you do that for? And he answers me in his own way. There are times when I have to go sing, especially like at a wedding or a funeral. Those things are very important to me. And I'll know I'm ready. I can tell a respiratory infection is going to start. I'm going to lose my voice. I've worried about it, this glass throat, for years enough so that I know what's going to happen. And so I'll just start praying. And oftentimes I said, okay, God, I have to do this on Saturday at 10 o'clock. can I have my voice?
Yeah.
If you want to, if it has to go,
at least
all
9:45.
you have to do is shift the time a little bit. I accept whatever has to happen, and I'll get there, and I'll make it through the wedding, or I'll make it through the funeral, and then by the time I get in my car and I drive home, it's gone. So he'll shift things for me, so that I can do stuff for other people, and it's happened enough
nice to have strong beliefs about things, especially in that.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of fun things in my lifetime. Some things I shouldn't have done, but I've done a lot of things, and most of them in recent years have been trying to give back to a community that's been especially good for me, and I know how you feel.
Oh, yes.
But every time I go to talk to 2 people or 200 people, I always just say, okay, just, the voice thing, I've gone through that for
Yes,
all
you
those
have.
years on the radio. Just make it so I don't let these people down.
Yeah.
And guess what? I never
You
have.
don't. You never
So-
have. Yeah, you went through surgery for your voice. I was
Yeah.
thinking about that the other day, and that was a hard thing to do. But it was just a little bit of payback to get what you have now again. So it was worth it.
You don't know.
You know.
We never know what tomorrow's going to bring, so enjoy today.
You go through what you have to go through.
So this is absolutely beautiful. Before we move to another spot, you keep mentioning Dave. Let's talk a little bit about Dave and what he does. And
Well, he's a little bit reserved in terms of this type of thing. So, but I'll tell
I'd
you.
love to be here taking
Yeah.
pictures of you while we were taking pictures.
He would do
of
that,
you.
just so long as he's on the other side of the camera. He's wonderfully creative. I mean, you see the stone wall. The deck was his design. We have like a 3-tiered deck. And the way the house is arranged, he's just so good. He has a wonderful, wonderful eye. He started out as actually a reporter in Sharon, Pennsylvania, which is where he's from, and he has a degree in journalism, and the things were going all right, but then they needed a photographer, and so he picked up the camera and said, well, I'll go try it. So he just picked it up, and he went out and he started teaching himself. They used him for all kinds of photography, and even murder photography, things like that, and he can do things I could never do. So he developed the photography thing, but in truth, it's the way he shapes his words, the way he shapes his photographs, and they all fit together. They really do. It's a beautiful pattern.
So he's been taking. Does he pronounce his name Pazak or Pazak?
It's Pazak. Not many people know, and I feel like I should tell them.
I've always said Pazak,
it's
but
Pazak.
it's like Rambach, Rambach.
Back. Well, I teach middle school kids, and actually I teach at St. John's from pre-K to 6, and then I run over to Seton, be the wandering minstrel for the 7th and 8th graders. And on my quizzes, one of my test bonuses is, please spell my name correctly. And it doesn't take long for the kids to get it. And the kids all know, and they'll tell their parents, no, it's not Pazak. Actually, Father McAvoy, who was here before, used to call me Mrs. Pizak. I said, please call me Lita. It's okay. So he did. But, it's P-A-C-Z-A-K, like Pacsac. And if you know from reading perspective, you have 2 consonants together, vowel in front, vowel behind. The vowels have the short sound, so it's Pazak. Only one
Pazak.
is invisible.
I want all of our viewers, every time they open the Press Republican newspaper, to look for that name under the pictures, because he's taken thousands and thousands and thousands. And
Yeah.
I've known both of you for a long, long time, and you both are very special people. That's why I wanted to give Dave his due.
Yeah.
What many of our viewers might be familiar with is photography, but not.
Not this. They don't know everything that he can do. He always surprises me. It's just beautiful. This grove was full of small trees and brush and garbage and, an old bent over sumacs, and just started coming out, and I took out some of it. I started working on clearing it, and then I couldn't do it anymore, so I came out and I watched him at one point, and he was cutting here and cutting there, and he left this and he left that, because he could see this as it's growing up. It's a nice little place to go and sit. You go sit on his stone wall sculpture there and just enjoy. You can sit there and talk to Mary. I had a wonderful, beautiful little girl come. She's about 5 years old with her family on Easter, and they needed to go because they had another part of Easter to do. But little Abby was down, had been introduced to Mary as a statue. I don't know that she had before. And my niece Anna, who introduced her, went off and running like any young child would do. And Abby stayed there and stayed there and stared and wouldn't move. They had to come down and take her away. I have a feeling there's a little special
You think there was a
thing
bond
going
there,
on
maybe?
there. I do.
That-
It's beautiful. So it just worked
Absolutely,
out well.
absolutely wonderful stories about both of you. I wanted to ask you before we go 1 minute farther. Once again, we're talking with Lita Kelly, Pazak,
Thank you.
and
What a gift.
I want to talk about Dave's father.
Oh, yes.
That story, that's another amazing story that deserves to be told before we move again.
Dave's father is a contractor, and when down in the Sharon Hermitage area in Pennsylvania, he made many of the houses that people lived in, and Dave and his brothers helped him work, so they know what they're doing in terms of that too. And in this one area where he's living in Clark, Pennsylvania, he had built so many of the houses, and he built his own house there, that it was incredible that last November when these tornadoes came through, they didn't really report them in Pennsylvania. They reported them everywhere else. You can see this path going right over through past the city and around and curving right into Clark, Pennsylvania, breaking trees and taking the homes. And one old man died. And actually, Eli was in his house trying to come upstairs to get down from downstairs to get to a safer place, and his house was picked up, and it picked up, and it looked like it had been rotated. I rotated all the things in it, and it was totally crushed and thrown. All the things in the cellar that were supposed to be here ended up over here, and vice versa. He was thrown about 100 yards, and later, this is after dark, found with all this rubble on top of him.
This is not a young guy.
No, he's about 76 years old, I think. And they took him to the hospital. He was in the hospital, and he had all kinds of fluid and blood in his brain. His head was huge. He had breaks in his pelvis, problems with the bones in his legs, all kinds of internal problems. But so we put him on a prayer chain or two up here, and prayed for some kind of relief. And they didn't think he would live, and then all of a sudden the head started to shrink and he started to come to, and it was just incredible how quickly it started to happen. Then as he was recuperating, they had taken different tests to see what was wrong, but the one thing they hadn't done was check his neck. And Janine Nichols and her prayer chain. They were really, really,
Isn't she
really
a special lady.
Oh yeah, they were praying really, really hard, and she keeps saying, "Well, has anything happened yet?" And I had to call. I called Tina Packwood, and she talked to Janine. Yeah, something happened. They decided before they were going to actually move him in bed. Well, somebody said, "Well, maybe we ought to take X-rays of his neck." So they took him in and they took X-rays, and they found that one of the vertebrae was cracked in such a way that he should have been a paraplegic. And so had they moved him without being careful of his neck, perhaps he would have been. But he had been moving his neck all along, and he wasn't a paraplegic. So the doctor down there, as far as I understand, said, well, if it didn't happen now, and perhaps it's fused, it would have happened before. But he's still not a paraplegic. It was the same injury that Christopher Reeves has.
Oh, yes.
And so when I called and I said, well, guess what happened? You could hear the smiles on the telephone. There was intervention.
So how's he doing now?
He's doing really well. Mark, David's brother Mark, who is a wonderful artist in wood, started building for him in the winter, and he built a workshop with a studio apartment in the back. So he's been in there since the winter time, and David and Mark have been working on the house itself, and it was just incredible how fast it's been going up. They redid the foundation. They started it from the bottom up. The foundation was there. They had some of the old foundation blocks they could use, but they started it, and it built and it built and it built. And from what I understand, the people around were building also. There was one house that he had built and sold that needed a lot of renovation. They had 10 guys over there working on it, and it wasn't going as fast as David and Mark did, all by themselves. So the siding is now up, the roof is on. Mark's working on the siding. David's going down pretty soon to do some more and see how far they can get. Eli can't work on it. He does some things, but he has a dislocated shoulder that apparently they say he's too old. They're not going to repair it. That's another story, and that's another place.
It's an interesting story, and I wanted to bring our viewers up to date on it, even though they don't know Eli, and I've never met him. I feel as though I do, because I think these are important stories to tell. We're going to move once again and find out a lot more about the life and the loves and the music and a lot of other things connected with this dear lady, Lita Kelly Pazak, in the town of Schuyler Falls on a beautiful June day.
Beautiful blessing.
We're inside the beautiful home of Lita Kelly Pazak on Shingle Street in the town of Schuyler Falls on a fabulous June day. And an hour and a half or 2 hours is not nearly enough time to even touch the highlights of this wonderful lady's life. But we'll nudge them as we go along. You and I have been friends for a long time, and when I was driving up here, I was trying to think of the first time we ever met. Do you have any recollection of that?
I remember that I always used to listen to you on the radio, and I especially loved the birthday thing. And you had,
the table.
yes, you had an anniversary for the station. And at the time, I was house sitting for my aunt's house in West Shazy, which was in one old brick house. I just loved it. You know, you walk in, it smells good. So it's a perfect place to do, where I did a lot of writing. And I said, well, I think I'm going to write a poem. And I wrote something called Commendation to a Station.
Oh,
and I brought it over.
I wish I had it
I
here.
think I just found this, and I think it's in
Okay.
here.
Oh.
So if it is, I will get it to you again.
And that's when you think that's the first time we ever met?
That was in the 70s. So I had always heard your voice, and I talked to you on the telephone, but I'd never met you. So what I did, when I brought that over, I finally got to be able to put the face to the
You
sound.
see, I knew about you, and I was a fan of yours because you were writing and singing music even
at the
before
time.
that. When did you seriously start writing music? In the 60s?
In the 60s. I started when I was in high school. And actually, I learned to play guitar in high school. I had a romantic interlude with a 16-year-old guy who was just the most wonderful guy in the world, but it just wasn't going to happen. His family wasn't ready for him to be out. He was almost like the father of the family, and there was a lot to do. So we always cared for each other, but we realized that it wasn't going to functionally work. So I was upset actually over it, and my father was being a prison guard up on the wall, picked up the telephone and said, I got a really depressed daughter here, what can I do for her? And some guy says, well, buy her guitar to get her some lessons. And, so he did.
Come on, that's not really how it started.
Yes, he did. He bought me this
Is it?
$25 K guitar with the action, which is how high the strings are off the neck. It was this high. Metal strings. I bled, but I didn't care. It was so wonderful. And I took a couple lessons, and then the guy was in the Air Force, and he took off, so I just taught myself. And I went to St. John's, and Sister Bernadine and Sister Theodore
Oh boy. Sister
said,
Theodore.
well, we're going to support this. She, of course, was English, and she wrote, and she wrote the school's alma mater, which I didn't realize at the time. But they said, okay, we'll help support it. They let me form a folk group and teach other people and come up with folk songs and for chapel. We had it every Friday, so we'd go in and we'd learn. And I don't know how good we were or how good we weren't in the beginning, but we got better and better. And we went and won contests on Channel 5 used to have different things, and our group would win. And I think there's a trophy down in the cellar of the school somewhere with my name on it. But I started to write because of that relationship, and then I never stopped. Later on, when I was working with in Lake Placid and playing with the Front Porch Family Reunion, I met someone who had been writing since he was very young, and he said, well, why don't you write more? And I said, well, what do I do? He said, well, you buy yourself a book, and you take it with you wherever you go, and whenever you have an idea, or you can steal a phrase, write it down in your book. and then see if it can turn into something. So I started doing that. I have to admit, I write a lot of stuff in my car. I can really just process in my car. And so I jot things down, and then I transfer them to the book. I have lots of good ideas, things that I was surprised at when I found my book. I had lost it for a few years.
So you started the book.
Started the book probably in 1970, the official book.
You thought you lost it.
Yeah.
It just showed up. Because you were devastated.
I could not find it.
You told me that you lost your book. Because it's like
Ancient.
it's like a Bible. When you have a book like this, it's like a Bible. It's like your diary when you were 12 years old.
I need to even repair the thing. I have a feeling chipmunks have eaten the spine. But it has all these little bits of information, things written on all kinds of
On the
pieces of
backs of
paper.
envelopes.
In my one over there, I have some song written for my friend Francine and her husband's 25th, written on a napkin, because that's what I could
sure.
find. They're different things. I've got ideas, things I've written that I like, things I've written that I don't like. I keep it all.
Yeah.
And when I lost it, because I used to use it to show kids at school the difference between a first draft and a final song. Because you can see there's a lot of process in here. And it was after bringing it to school that I couldn't find it. Well, apparently in some fit of, I don't know, wisdom or madness, I took it back. I must have taken it back, and I threw it in a box in the cellar where it couldn't get lost, except to me. And I just found it again. I've been going through my mother's stuff and family things I have in the cellar because I've been dealing with her estate, and so I've started digging in boxes to make sure I could coordinate things, and there it was.
Isn't that?
So I have my book back.
That's another thing to be grateful for, because it's so
is.
much a part of who you are.
It really is. A lot of the songs on my my cassette album that I put out, Outside View, they all came from
Wonderful, wonderful cassette.
here. So,
I was,
Thank
you know,
you.
even while you were speaking, and you say you think we met in the 70s, I probably heard your name for the first time in 1964. I have memories for concepts and the beautiful things that happened to me in my life, but names and situations sometimes escape me. But I think, as I told Calvin on the way up here, it was during the sesquicentennial celebration in 1964, when I was a narrator for that big play, that show that they did at Bailey Avenue Ballpark. And somebody related to your family was a narrator who was maybe a professor at the college or something, or taught math, or...
that probably was my cousin's husband at the time.
And we worked together, and
Yeah.
that's where I first heard your name, was exposed to your music in the very early 64. How old? I mean, I don't want to give away any details.
I'm only 20.
But, yeah. But
No,
that's
I
when I
was-
first heard about Lita Kelly.
64 was when I first moved to Plattsburgh.
Was it?
Yeah, I was
So,
14 years old.
so there you go. But you were
So-
you were singing music somewhere in school or something after that.
Yeah, I did a lot of different things, and I did. Sang it actually at different masses and things, because I started that when I was really young. I was in third grade when I started working in choirs. And I did some musicals, and later on I did the Junior Miss pageant, and I sang there.
Oh my goodness!
Nick Pope was
Oh,
one
my
of the judges, and
Oh.
he supported me after that. I mean,
Talk about
win,
wonderful memories.
oh, it's just great. What was it? Trying to remember the song, whether it was More Than the Greatest Love. I'm not sure if it was More that I sang, or Unchained Melody.
Unchained Melody.
That was it. I learned how to play it on my guitar, and
The
I
Righteous
went in
Brothers.
there. It's the beginning of my my public coming out.
Well, you know, the 60s was a very folksy, 60s and early 70s, very folksy era. The 50s were too, when you were very little. But, you know, I can remember all the wonderful folk groups in those days. And I lived on Long Island in the 50s going to college, and I would go to every television show I could go introduced. I saw for example, the Brothers Four, their very first television appearance on the Jimmy Rogers Show.
Well, I don't know the Jimmy Rogers Show. Probably know the
But
music.
way, way back when, and I loved all the like the Kingston Trio.
The
I mean,
Hootenannies. Now, how many of the modern day children even know
What
what
a
a Hootenanny is, and some adults? Yeah, a Hootenanny was a gathering of folk people, and they used to have a professional one on television, and the Hootenanny, I'd watch that. That was before I even played. And I was really interested in the harmonies and what they did, and so I stole a few ideas from my little folk master group, and somebody said, oh, you need to work with Joan Baez stuff, and gave me all kinds of stuff of hers. I went and bought a book, and I used to do a lot of her things. I
I've
remember,
often wondered
yeah.
if she was a big influence on you.
Yeah, she
You
has
have
a
your
lot
own
of
unique
heart.
style, but I can see elements.
Yeah.
You can't help it when you're growing up if you really love somebody.
Oh,
and
I
emulating
had
them,
everything memorized, and no, I really had to try and even avoid being another Joan Baez. It wasn't going to be me, but the parts of her that I really enjoyed were her heart and her soul, and how she transferred them to the music, so that it wasn't just your standard. Anybody can sing things flat, but can somebody put their emotions and their thoughts in it? Some people in the audiences don't really like that. But that's who I am, so that's going to be. I'm not going to change.
And you have chosen to share that with people in myriad ways, with little people and big people and senior citizens, and you've performed for so many groups. She wrote a special song for a Victims' Day that we had a couple of years ago that probably was only performed in public once.
Once.
Unbelievable. We
I
sat
have it. I
together
found
for
it
an
last
hour and we
night.
got some ideas. And she wrote the song, and everybody was so deeply moved. And I told somebody the other day, I bet you she's never sung that song in public again.
Last night at about 11:15, I sang that song again.
Did you?
I went through my things and I said, what have I written? And usually when I write something, there is a reason. After you came to my schoolroom at St. John's, we sat and we talked and we thought up ideas, and I was thinking of writing something to someone else's tune. But then I realized, we're all victims one way or the other. And something happens, something changes when you've been victimized. I don't care whether it's from your parents, your brothers and sisters, a stranger, a friend, an employer. There are a lot of different ways that you can be victimized, so we all can relate to that. And I said, how do I feel about having those things happen to me? And so this song, A Question of Power. People, people want power over you, and because of position, oftentimes they do. If you're a child, you don't have a lot of power. They don't tell you do. Later on, I wish more kids knew how much power they really do have. But people will use that, and they feel good because they're using their power against you. So what does a victim have to do? Bring that power back to yourself. I'm stubborn. I'm Irish stubborn. And I've had different things happen, but I'm not going to let them win.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it to try and help.
It's so kind of you to do that, first of all, and your appearance, people are still talking about it. And just to set the record straight for people who might be viewing this program for the first time, after a long career in radio, almost 36 years, I decided to change gears. So I became a crime victims advocate in the Clinton County Department of Probation. And I work with dozens of people every week who are the victims of various crimes. And these Victims' Days that we celebrate every year are very important for the victims to get together and say, they all look like normal people. And then you find out what horrible things might have happened to them in their lifetime.
And they're willing to share. And you always have a guest speaker that just blows your mind and blows your heart. The day that we did it was several years ago. We did it down on the gazebo across from Kent the Lord House, and we did it in April. And we were looking at, what do we do in case of snow?
You never know, but
and
guess what?
It turned out to be the most beautiful, warm day with a breeze coming off the water. That's another blessing. That was great. That was terrific.
We have lots
It
of
was
those,
beautiful.
don't we?
Oh, yes. But you have to notice them. Remember them.
We want to hear a song.
Actually, I would like to do that.
You got your
Question of
special
power.
fingernails on, so
My
I know you're ready.
Back scratch, anyone? Oh, wonderful. If you don't mind, I'd like to do it because there was a woman, and I still have her name upstairs in my dresser, that said, if you ever record it, I really need a copy.
Oh.
And I haven't recorded it yet. So this would be a way to give that woman what she needs.
Isn't that cool?
I promised. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but
Oh, that's wonderful.
if you don't mind.
I had no idea that you would actually sing that song for us, for me and Calvin first, and then for the rest of the world. And so I'm so delighted that you're going to do that today. So please do it.
Okay, just a question of power, and it was 2001. brand new day. Your future's there before you. It's all going your way. There's no way you can realize what's waiting there for you to take away your mind and heart before the day is through. It's a question of power, and no matter what you lose, question of rape, of theft, of murder, it's adult or child abuse. Where what is right meets what is wrong, your tune becomes a funeral song. You've just become a victim, a helpless, tortured victim. What's it like to be a victim with nothing more to lose? It only took a moment, took an hour, took a day. You look over your shoulder, someone took your peace away. Your house no longer is a home. You try to live with shame. What did I do to bring this on? Am I really to blame? It's a question of power and dealing with the fear. A question of when to turn, which bridge to burn. Where do you go from here? If helpless is as helpless does, you need to take control, because you can't remain a victim. You won't remain a victim. You fight to win your freedom back and all that you hold dear. Let's take a look around us and open up our eyes to all who've walked inside these shoes and all who realize the opposite of hate is love, and darkness becomes light when we reach out to each other. Those wrongs become our rights. It's a question of power. You no longer have to wait, 'cause you're thinking floors and ceilings, but they're really doors and gates. As a candle flickers and it glows, let's help each other find the road to not feel like a victim, to heal another victim, and remember that along with every thorn we find a rose. Just remember that with every thorn there always is a rose.
Wow. Such a beautiful song.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing it originally and spending all that time, and to do it for us today. It's opened my heart again. I try to get through these programs without crying. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Calvin and I have cried together. It may not be the manly thing to do, but it seems right at the time.
For real, man,
Each
it
time we
is.
talk to the kids that go to Nicaragua
Oh,
and
yes.
come back, and I see how their lives are changed. And one young man who was pretty hard of heart when he took the trip comes back and says, I think I'm going to be a missionary. And I say, oh dear gosh.
It works.
Isn't it amazing?
It works.
That's a beautiful song. That's an absolutely beautiful song. I want to just talk for a moment about other things that have happened in your life twisting and turning. When I was a young person, I had dreams of doing this or doing that, being a civil engineer, then being a singer, a performer, a jazz artist, or whatever. What were your aspirations when you were a youngster?
Actually, when I was really young, I used to go to school with my mother. She was one of the best first grade teachers that.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yes. She was wonderful, and things I've heard even since she's passed on from some of her former schoolmates. I was right. She was a good teacher all those years ago. So I wanted to do that. And as I've gone through life, I mean, sometimes I might get preachy, but I'm always teachy. It's a little. I want to share what I know and learn some more, so that I can share some more. And so I wanted to do that. But then I got almost through my college career here at Plattsburgh, and joined a group, because that was another thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to sing. That's just another way to teach, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I joined a group called the Front Porch Family Reunion. We had 5 people for 2 months. My brother was in it, Joan Crane, Lisa McDonald, and Fred Crane was the bass player. And we managed to get have a manager, and we were booked into Lake Placid for a while. We started up there, but then it was a little hard for Fred and Joan at that point, because he's working a full-time job. Now I know what that means, because so am I. But so they dropped out, and the 3 of us, Lisa, Mike, and I, kept on going, and that was fun. It really was nice, and it was a real learning experience to go touring. And we went down as far as Florida and back, stopping at different places along the way and meeting people. And I even had almost a record at that time. I wrote a song called Window of My Life, which is on Outside View. And this producer from United Artists in Montreal was a friend of our manager, and when he heard it, he wanted it, so we went up and recorded it. And on Halloween.
Oh, come on.
Oh, yes, Halloween. We got up in the studio in the old city of Montreal. Couldn't get in to do it till 3 o'clock in the morning, because they were doing a 30-second commercial that took a lot longer than we did. Junior Barber, it was the first time I met Junior. I had him come up, and he was working on it, yeah. And we had all these people in a couple vehicles, and of course, long-haired men and things like that. We went through the border. Fine going up, coming down, it was different. It was really, really cold. Came through the border. Guy there wanted to have us pull our guitars out and open them up right on the sidewalk, and here I am, this mousy little whatever. I said, no, I can't do that. He said, what do you mean you can't do that? I said, I can't do that. If I open my guitar and it's cold out here, it's going to break. And so I'd rather not do that. And he said, well, I'll go get my supervisor. So he went in and he got his supervisor. I was glad I had my college career, because the last gym requirement that I had, well, I took bowling, but the last one was judo. Who was my judo teacher, but his supervisor.
Oh,
so he
wonderful?
came out, we're talking judo moves and this, that, and the other thing. He said, we have to open it, but why don't we bring it inside? Would that be okay? I said, absolutely, not a problem.
Yeah.
There are ways.
Isn't that amazing?
So it was fun. We talked for a while.
So you performed in a lot of places. Did you work with Joan on KDR?
No, I never worked there. We did some performances there. Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yes, we did.
I remember Joan, and I thought I remembered you on the air on WKDR, a station that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
So it's just a memory here in the city of Plattsburgh, but it was a dream for Peter Gibbard back in those days. And
it was, and Charlie Stone was a mainstay there for a long time. And Joan was a DJ there, because it was country. Then it went to talk, and once it finished with the talk, I just never...
Yeah.
I never listened again, because I'm not much of a talk show person. But we did that, and I ended up going through a number of different groups. But actually, the Bob Helfant, the man who convinced me I should write, ended up taking my brother's place in the Front Porch, and we did a lot of traveling and a lot of writing. But it was when I was with him and Lisa that I realized that I needed to get back and get my degree. I'd been in enough motel rooms waiting to play, gone to enough after hours, come on over and we'll talk, and heard so much that was so wrong, or there's just a lot of lies from people, and you get so jaded after a while. And I said, this isn't real. I love the music, but I don't like this touring stuff. So I came back, and I went back and lived with my parents and went to school. I played on the side, but I got my degree, and so I I can teach. I have a reading degree, and I got my master's later on in actually in reading. And I did that by finding ways to put the teaching and the music together. I love history. When I grew up, we had 6 kids, and my parents, I've seen all their statements, their pay stubs and things, because I have everything down cellar. I couldn't believe how much a prison guard and a teacher didn't make in those days.
In those days, yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of money. I wondered why. We had a lot of tuna noodle casserole and and mushroom soup every Friday. But our fun was to get in the station wagon and go riding around the North Country, seeing things that were historical, whether it was the fish hatchery, going up to Saranac Lake and seeing the area where my father came from. Going up to Lion Mountain, I had relatives that were in the mines there. My dad had been a miner, so I was starting to get all these stories, prison stories and mining stories from him, and it was fun. But I always asked myself, why are people here? Here's Redford. Why are people here instead of like in Plattsburgh, where everything is, right? Now, I was little. And then finally, I said, I was working with Lola Johnson, the Council on the Arts. She hauled me in, and a couple of others of us, and said, we'd like to start a local artist in residency program. And we'd like you to come up with a proposal so that we can get you in the schools and get you in there, 1 day a week for, like, say, a 10-week unit. And she said, well, how can you take what you like and put it together and make it marketable for the schools? At that time, the 4th grade requirement for local history played right into my hands. It was great. So I went around and interviewed a lot of people and took a lot of slides, and Francine Norcross went with me. She was a photographer at the time, and she took a lot of slides. And we have maple sugaring slides. I have maritime and military history slides. I have wonderful things for the Underground Railroad, and I'm building on that now again. I have the history of Clinton Prison. I have apple picking unit. I have one on Altona blueberries, a unit on prohibition, lumbering. Great stuff from Blue Mountain Lake. The museum let me take some things there. The story of Joe Call, the Lewis Giant, which kids and I turned into a song. And
Yes.
I think we're probably the only ones who have ever written anything about it. But I took it all and I put it together and made it work. Slides, stories, gossip, and music.
Isn't it great?
And teaching kids.
Isn't that fantastic? Because as you rattle off those topics, I was thinking to myself, as Calvin was, we've covered most of those topics on our little corner. Been there, talked to the old miners, been to Blue Mountain Lake. We love history as well.
Oh, right.
And so we've talked to quite a few of these people, been to the places, and shown them to our viewers through the eyes of the hometown cable camera. So, and you're doing the same, and it seems to be a mission for us to preserve this history.
It's wonderful.
Engender a love for history among the young people. I don't think you could do any better. Some young people just don't have that sense of perspective of history.
Sometimes they need to be introduced. They don't think of it as something of interest at all. But when you go in and show them old antique things and say, do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? Do you have anything at home? Anything that could be Redford glass. There's Redford. They go home and they check and they ask their parents, and then I said, don't forget to ask your grandparents. See what they know. And they'll go and they'll talk to him, and all of a sudden they come back with these stories. My grandmother did this, my grandfather did that. I went out to Beekmantown, and one boy said, oh, we found a sword in a field when we plowed it up.
Oh,
I said,
come on.
That's War of 1812.
Why weren't we there?
Yeah, and he said, well, I'd like to show it to you. And we went through all the steps necessary for him to bring this weapon of
Yeah, you can't just bring a sword to school these days,
School.
by the way, or a jackknife, or
No.
a sharp pen.
Then it was a little easier, but he brought it in, and we were very careful, and the kids were able to see it. I brought in cross-cut saws, very sharp. I have an Altona blueberry basket. The guy that started Altona Blueberries had a problem with his wagon, all functional, and these inventions come from here. He was trying to take blueberries up to Montreal to sell them there because he was French-speaking and couldn't work in the clerk positions that were offered down here. So and they would fall out of the poor wagon, and he's bumping on these old roads, and half of his produce ends up on the ground. So he made these small circular baskets with the circular top that fit neatly, and he could put so many of them in there and stack them, and they were pristine at the end. I mean, it's just great. The warden from Clinton Prison, his name was Ransom Cook. I thought that's a great name for a warden. He was an inventor. They had the prison started as an iron mine because they wanted a prison that sustained itself. But they had the mines behind the walls, and they had crushers behind the walls, but they didn't have separators, so they'd have to take the iron ore pulled by oxen all the way down to Saranac to finish the processing and back. He says, I don't want those men down there. I don't want to put those people in danger. There's got to be a better way than shoving all this crushed stone in a jigging basket and running it up and down in the water. And he said, oh, yeah, iron ore, magnets, stick together. So he took these great big would look like telephone poles today, and these long, skinny fingers of magnets, and he put them around. It looked like the biggest porcupine you ever saw. And they would put that down into the crushed stone and lift it up, and then you have your first magnetic separator. Put Saranac out of business. Morrisonville, the flood did. But it was the first magnetic separator came from behind the walls of Clinton Prison. That's great. These kids
The
need to know
history of that prison is great. Matter of fact, as we're recording this, we're in late June of 2003. I mention that so that people will know who will see it 10 years from now.
Oh, true.
And the program is not aired on the day it's recorded. We like to think that everything we do is historical in its own right. But as in real time, we just had a program on either last night or the night before on the history of the prison from the perspective of Terrence Gilroy, our good friend,
wonderful.
up in Dannemora, who's been there and done that for so many years, and to drag out the old newspapers of the riot and
He had a
all the
picture of my
things.
father. He
Come
knew who he
on.
was. In this, out in the street, all these prison guards were there getting into procession for a parade, and he said, and here's your father. He was trying to figure out who they all were. It was wonderful. He looked so handsome in his uniform. And I wouldn't have had that had it not been for Terrence Gilroy. He just
everything's
amazing.
connected. There are no coincidences. I say it over and over again. And what I'm supposed to say over and over again for those people who tune in late is we're just having so much fun talking with Lita Kelly Pazak at her home. And before you play another song and sing another song, I want you to tell our viewers, remember what I just said about no coincidences, about the connection that you had with my mother through a friend of ours in that beautiful little kitty cat dish that you returned to me. That was like a miracle. Every time I look at it, it's hanging in my kitchen.
I'm so
And every
glad.
time I dry the dishes and Kay washes at night, I look at that little dish over and I say, thank you, Lita, for getting that.
No, you are
Tell me that
welcome.
story now.
I have, except for this past year when I had to take a bit of a sabbatical, I have been working for years at the North Pole at Santa's Workshop as Christmas Carol for these Christmas preview packages that for 5 weeks around Christmas, families come in, they stay the weekend, they have all kinds of wonderful entertainment. Well, when I first started there, I ended up being paired with Mother Goose. And Mother Goose she was my teacher. She was very much a professional person. Her name is Margot Hess. She had been a magician's assistant. When she ended up being an assistant to this guy that she actually said she didn't really like originally, but he needed some help, and that opened some wonderful doors. Her husband, Larry Hess. They had wonderful stories all over, and she learned a lot about being a professional there. She and Larry came up to the workshop to work. He is a magician, and she's a puppet master. She makes her own puppets and did puppet shows. Well, he had just died a couple years before I first went up there, so I only know from him of him in stories. But apparently, your father
Was a professional
was
magician.
a professional magician. And they knew each other and used to share stories and visit.
Sure.
And so Margot knew your dad and your mom, and she has some wonderful stories she could tell you if we could ever get you folks together. She's out in California now, so that might be a little hard. But she would always tell me, when she knew that I knew you, she'd tell me these stories. And when you started your column, I said, Margot, guess what I have for you? I have a Gordy. And she said, what do you mean you have a Gordy? I said, I have his first article. So I sent that to her. Actually, I copied it and sent her a copy. And then I started sending her Gordies so that she could keep up with what was going on with you, because every once in a while, especially, you throw information about your father or your mother in there, and it means a great deal to her. Now I have a stack of Gordies from the last year I haven't shipped to her, so we're going to go out and visit.
Oh.
I'll carry them in my suitcase. But she had to leave. She had to move to California in order to move out with her son. She's now 89 years old.
Is it?
And
she
she's
lived in
wonderful.
an A-frame up
lived-
in J, right?
Yeah, she did, in a very, very specialized house. The most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful outfit of knickknacks and portraits. And she had a sugaring painting that's as big as my window. And she found a way to seat it. She had carousel horses up on the windows. Just the most wonderful fantasy, all kinds of Christmas memorabilia. And when she moved, she wanted to make sure that you had something. So she had the little kitty plate. It was an ashtray, I think.
Yeah.
And she had it on her wall by her countertop, and had been there for years. Ever since I knew her, it was there. And she'd once in a while tell me different stories when I'd come and visit. And she always said, that was from Gordy's dad. And so when she left, she gave it to me, and I brought it over to Gordy. And it's on his wall.
Perfect circle, isn't it?
It really
Isn't that
is.
amazing? And it's cute. Someday we'll show a picture of it when Calvin's in my house again. I love it.
You're getting to sit on her stool.
I love it.
Yeah,
Isn't it
love your
great?
stool.
Oh my goodness.
Quite an antique, too.
That's great. What are you going to sing for us next? Do you have an idea?
Actually, since we were going into the historical stories, I have a song that I did a few years ago for a mining day up in Lionmont.
Ah.
Now, the woman who booked me to go perform there for their special day, I told her, like the year before, I was going to write a song. And I'd have a special, because I'd always wanted to write a song about the mines. And here comes the day. It was getting very, very, very close. And guess who hadn't written that song yet?
Oh, do I know
So
that feeling?
The article came out in the paper saying that Lita Kelly is going to write a song for this weekend's performance. And I hadn't thought of an idea. I hadn't thought of a twist. Well, I took my dad to Pickles Tolosky's camp. Pickles and his
Well, that
wife.
would do it.
Yes, I got them together and videotaped about 2.5 hours worth of them talking about mining. It was incredible. And his wife was sitting over in the corner. Of course, she's interested, but she didn't want to be that involved. Well, those guys could have talked forever, and it was wonderful. But I realized that I had to bring it to a close because I hadn't brought enough video camera tape. So I finally said, well, in conclusion, to the men, if you had it to do over and the mines were to open again, which they could, the iron ore's the best in the world, if it did, would you want your children going down to work in the mines? And both of them said, the way things are these days, with access to computers and the way it's opened the world, it's more important for our young people to get an education and go that route. And they were talking about that, and I said, I agree with that. But that wasn't exactly the ending I was looking for. You know how that is. So I just decided to put her on the spot, and I hope she wouldn't be angry with me. And I zoomed the camera around, and I pointed it to her. And I said, how would you answer that question? And she said, no way. I would never want my children to go down there. She said, I only went down once, and that was enough. They wouldn't allow women down there. They had an open house day. She went down in the skip, which is the elevator, and she saw what it was like, and it was terrifying. And she was so nervous. She said, I would never want my sons there. And she said, besides, we weren't allowed there. We were out in the village, and the whistles would blow at 6 in the morning and at noon. But you know that we all know each other. We're all friends. And when the whistle would blow at the wrong time, something had happened.
Oh, yeah.
A man was down in the crusher. usually a powder accident. They'd go in, the dynamiters would go in, and they had to drill in with these 250-pound drills and make places with bars, iron rods, so they could go up, and then they'd put the dynamite in, and then they'd take the machines out so there wouldn't be any sparks, and they were supposed to go get the fuses and then put the fuses on the dynamite and then retreat. Well, to save money, oftentimes they had the fuses in their pockets, and there'd be a problem with that. But one thing that would happen, and it was regular, statistically regular, when the next people would go in to work where the dynamiters had been, one hadn't blown. And the dust from the dynamite, if they'd come in, they'd take the ore out, the dust would cover it. You wouldn't even see it. So they're supposed to wash down the walls just to check to see if any of them hadn't. And this one day, my father and another man were called over, and the superintendent said, "It's going to happen." He says, "You're smoking down there, Kelly. If I see you with a cigarette again, you're out of here." And he said to the other guy, "You have to wash down the chamber before you go. You've got to make sure, because we're ready for another powder blow." So they went down in, and it was maybe 20, 30 minutes later, there was an explosion. And this guy's brother said, "I'm going after him," and the superintendent says, "No, you're not, you're fired." He says, "I don't care, I'm going." They figured there was nothing left. He went in and pulled him out on his shoulders, and he lived. They were taking powder out of his body. 20 minutes they'd have to take the powder out, change the sheets in the hospital. They had to pick out his flannel shirt out with tweezers. But he lived. It was just incredible, thanks to his brother. And so when she said, but when that whistle blew, we all looked up on the hill to see the man with the car and to see who he was going to come and visit. And then we'd know. And then after he would take care of the woman of the home, he would go over to the children, to the school, because the school was right there. And he'd go in and he'd talk to the principal, and then they would go door to door to door to let everybody know what had happened, because everybody needed to know. So I wrote this song and dedicated it to her because she was so inspirational. The look on her face was so wonderful, so real. And the song is called "When the Whistle Blew." Wind your way to the shoreline, point your face to the west. See the honeycombed mountains where the mines are at rest. Down under Mineville lie mountain and Chattagee Lake, where the tales of the miners tell you what was at stake. Where the whistle blew and started the day. Lower down in the skips, the men all made their way to the drills, to the muck, to pull chutes full of ore, to man the crushers, the dynamite, the smelters and more. To man the crushers, the dynamite, the smelters and more. When business was steady, they all got good pay. Still, a wise family knew that they should put some away for the slow times with no work, when there wasn't enough. You'd even welcome the dangers when the going got tough. And then the whistle blew, you all listened to hear. There's word of a contract with nothing to fear, while the noise of the trucks and the hum of the mines brought it all back on track, got it all back online. Brought it all back on track, got it all back online. But then came the warning, there's an accident due. Hose it down till you know if your dynamite blew. As so often before, that one careless mistake drove that's still hard to take, 'cause the whistle blew early at a time that was wrong. The women all froze, what was taking so long, and the children at school felt the cold chill of fear, as the whole town just watched and waited to hear, as the whole town just watched and waited to hear. Please, who was it this time, and what had he done? Was it an uncle, a father, a brother, a son? Still you knew without fail that the work would go on, 'cause the risks and the chances were the verse of the song. Yes, the risks and the chances were the verse of this song. And the whistle blew daily as the ships changed their pace. Each family pushed forward, each man took his place, in the dark and the damp, in cathedrals of rock, till the last whistle blew and it ground to a stop. Yes, that last whistle blew, it all ground to a stop.
Beautiful. 1999, you wrote that.
1999. Yeah, it's a few years old. Made a mistake in the beginning because I keep changing the rhythm, but then again, you'll have to buy this CD if it ever comes out.
It's beautiful. How many songs have you written,
Oh my goodness.
if you had to guess?
Probably a couple 150.
Have you really?
Something, yeah. Some of them are good, and some of them are terrible, and some of them are in transition
Well,
because I'm growing up.
That's true of any,
You know.
anybody who's creative does things that they don't especially like in retrospect.
But
And
it's
I-
good to keep them.
And it's good
You
to
don't
keep
lose
them, and I have.
Keep
And
the
some,
good stuff and the bad stuff. You
I'm-
never know.
I'm not a musician, at least anymore, but the things that I write that I don't like, I find other people do.
It's true. If I didn't have, well, Francine Norcross, my friend, she's a very strong musical supporter. She always has been. And David, you know, they'll say, yeah, that's a good song.
I
And
rely-
I'll look at it in a different way because I take the personal and I can get rid of it and turn it into somebody else's eyes and their viewpoint. And that turns it into a new song for me.
It's interesting. Everybody knows that Kay is my best critic, and she certainly is the first one to edit whatever I write. She's sometimes brutally honest, but always gives me an education, and she's my first line of defense for what I write, whether it's good and bad, and so I trust her judgment, and it's great.
It's good to have somebody. It really is.
How many guitars do you own?
Oh, well, I have an old Blue Ridge Gibson that's in terrible
Do you
shape.
really?
Yes, it's at school. I bring it there because it's basically was made, it cost me over $1,000, and it turns out it's made out of plywood. So I brought it up to this guy in Malone, who's a wonderful guitar fixer, and I said, should I redo it? He said, no, just let it keep getting knocked and use it as well as you can, and we'll just repair it as needed. So I don't have to worry if the kids want to play it. If I run into the doorknob, oh well. But this Martin was one I bought in New York City. I tried 21 out. Then I picked the first one that I brought me. It was really
Isn't
funny.
that amazing?
Yeah, I have, one, two, probably three, a small acoustic nylon style string guitars. I have a banjo. I have a banjolin, a beautiful gourd-back
I've
mandolin.
never seen you play the banjo or the mandolin.
I haven't learned to play the mandolin. I used to play one. I had a nice one, but I needed to sell it. And so a friend of mine bought it, and he fixed it up, and he learned to play the mandolin. I played chords, and I actually played it in a theater production at the college. I was Gwendolyn, and she was musical. So I played it, and then I had to sell it. And Dave Nichols, the man who does such wonderful guitar repair in Malone, he had one hanging on his wall, and when I told him, I just love gourd mandolins, he said, here, you can have it. And he showed me how to work it, but I need to have some lessons, and I'd like to do that. I have a violin. My grandfather on my mom's side, Grover Cleveland Lynch, was a violinist.
Oh, Grover Cleveland Lynch.
Grover Cleveland.
Wow, I love it.
Yep, he used to fiddle and he used to write songs, and a lot of I remember when he'd take anything that you had to say and he'd turn it into something funny and rhythmical. He was hilarious. He was just incredible. So I got one at auction, and it's pretty well fixed up, and I want to learn to play that. On my dad's side, there was music. My great aunt May Martin, used to play fiddle for barn dances up in Shazy Lake.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
So yeah, it's a thing that has to happen. I'm not sure exactly when, but it will. I'll do enough to be able to say I can play.
Music certainly is in the genes. And you're funny you should mention your old Gibson guitar, because we did a great story on the history of Orville Gibson, who was born right down in outside of Chateauguay and Cherubusco area. We went to his original home, and it's just a hole in the ground, right? And we had a great time talking about him, and he started in the mandolin business in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He ended up going through his whole career, and of course they made many guitars, and he came back and had the good sense to die in the North Country so we could claim him again as a native son, and lived and died in Malone, New York, with no real blood connection that we're able to discover yet with the famous Gibson brothers. But they would love to have that blood connection if
now
they
there's
could.
DNA,
Yeah.
and there's talent, and whether you have DNA or not, their talent
In any
is
case, mandolin,
belongs.
I've always loved the mandolin. Flat and Scruggs are among my
They're
favorite
wonderful.
people in the whole wide world.
Mandolin and banjo.
So this Martin guitar is your favorite now?
It's my favorite. It's got a lot of presence. It's been adjusted a few times. When I first got it, it was better for flat picking because the action was high than for finger picking. But I kept it that way anyway. I used light gauge strings to bring it down a little bit. And then at one point I had trouble with my hands with an arthritis-like response, and it was very painful to play. So that's when I brought it up to Dave and I said, I can't play. I'm going to have to quit. He said, oh, no, you're not. I'll fix it. So he did. He changed the action. I can still use light strings. It's easy to play. It's smooth, but it didn't lose a lot of its sound, which is great.
It's a wonderfully sounding guitar, and there's nothing like an acoustic guitar. I don't know if you ever thought about getting wired for sound, but you know.
I have a pickup in it.
Oh,
But,
do you?
yeah,
Oh, you do?
I haven't. I've used it in times when there's not enough mics to go around or whatever, but I haven't fine-tuned it. I like an acoustic sound, but it has a good sound too, so what I'm hoping is maybe someday Roy Hurd will come over and help me adjust. He's got such a wonderful ear.
Well, he's a good guy and a good friend also, and we had a lot of fun at his house.
Yeah.
Like we're here. Actually, not his house, his aunt's house, wasn't it? And but he sang some songs for us, and he came back to the North Country.
Yes.
He was so disenchanted with things that happened with him in Nashville. A lot of it we couldn't even get into in the air, like a lot of the dark times in all of our lives that we don't necessarily want to share with anybody but our therapist.
Yeah, that's right.
But he did. He was treated very badly at times. So he came up here to write music. We haven't talked to him in what, a couple of years?
Yeah.
Maybe about 2 years now. But we do play his tape every now and again,
That's
and
right.
people love to hear it.
Oh, he's got wonderful stories, and the things that went wrong and the things that went right helped to hone Roy, just like all these things have helped us. It's who you are, it's who you become, and it opens up your sensitivities to other people, and he's one of the most sensitive, understanding people I know. You don't get there just by osmosis. You get there through pain. You got to suffer if you want to sing the blues. Good old song by Dave Brombeck, and it's true. I mean, when I signed a record contract with the people in Montreal, it was a 7-year contract. Some of the things they came up with, even before that record was going to be pressed, were things that I was not going to subscribe to or ascribe to. I wasn't going to follow the lead they were heading me in. I said that morally it wasn't right. You make your decisions. So what do you want to do? I'll wait the 7 years out. I've got the rest of my life. I couldn't go with anybody else as a company, and I didn't have any money to buy myself out of that contract. But I said, okay, let them sit on it. I'll record the window of my life somewhere else, and I did. I did it myself in 1992. So that's there's other ways to do it, and there's other times, and it's just you have to decide what you want to do, which way you want to go. Who are you really? And that wasn't me.
There's so much more to talk about and so much more to see, and we're going to do that when our program continues with Lita Kelly. People go down into the Tennessee Valley, the hills of Kentucky and West Virginia, and try to discover the folklore and the songs that people sang 150 or 200 years ago. And a lot of people who study the history of the music that's associated with the local areas, mine disasters and floods and so on. Stanley Ransom, who is our good mutual friend, has done a lot of the history of folk songs on Long Island and here in northern New York, and has written such charming songs as the city with the what? The
Plattsburgh sewage plant.
yeah, and the city with the stereo smell.
Oh, I like that.
And one about the inner tubes coming down the Saranac, and
That works.
he's a charming guy. And I know you've looked into a lot of the history of the songs from the North Country, but you also like to write topical songs which apply to an event and so on, and you've written quite a few of those, haven't you?
Actually, when you think of it, I guess I have. But the one that stands out as the most effective at this point is the one that I wrote after the ice storm.
It shows up in almost every program we do because it was such a pervasive tragedy for us.
It was
not
incredible.
as bad as some disasters are in other areas, and we look at the floods they're having in southern Florida and the Midwest and West, and the huge fires out in Albuquerque and so on, and we're blessed in that way. But every now and again, somebody tweaks us. And boy, did we get tweaked. And
Certainly did.
what year was that?
It
1998.
was 1998, and it was right after Christmas vacation. We were supposed to go back to school, and nobody was going anywhere. You can imagine what it was like out here. If you could see our trees without their leaves, they are very misshapen. The crowns of everything, the pine trees, you hear the big, huge snapping. It was snap, 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 snap all over here. 'Cause the big pines out by the stone wall. It was tremendous to see how much came down. Our neighbors, I took a shot of our neighbors in his driveway, and he looks this little compared to this much of pileup of evergreen branches that he had to clear to get out. It just was incredible.
Nothing hit your house?
Nothing hit the house. We were lucky.
Isn't
We were really, really lucky. David, after it happened, David knew he had to get in. And so he always carries a hard hat in his car. You never know when you're going to need it. And this time he threw the chainsaw in. And with the roads as bad as they were, he made it through. He had to stop and cut his way down the road and out to the main drag, and even on the way in, because they were still coming down. And he made it. He made it to work. He did some tremendous shots, but he had to cut his way through. I went down to get water there's a spring nearby, which is just great. But I had enough gas in the car, but I had to do the same thing, stop and push things out of the way to get down there, get water before
You and
the
lots
trees.
of other people.
Yes.
I got some video of that spring and all the
Thank
cars
God.
lined up.
Yes, people were walking down the streets
Sure.
with their garbage barrels on wheels, bringing it down to fill it up because you needed it for everything, including your toilet. I mean, there were people. We were lucky it snowed afterwards because we were able to save a lot of our food in the snowbank. But people later, were recounting how they made it through the ice storm, and so many people were saying that the toilet was the hardest thing because they had to get enough water to fill the bowl and the back, so there'd be enough to flush. And I said, no, you don't have to do that. Just get a bucket of water and throw it, not down the back, but just throw it down the bowl. It'll push it out of the way. We melted on the fireplace, and there we are. We had no trouble.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, I just
But we found out
ways
how
to do it.
resourceful we were. and
Ways
we
to do it.
found out what a neat thing, besides the aesthetic value, what a neat thing a fireplace is.
Oh, I
Or
know,
a
it's
wood
wonderful.
stove,
Or a
or
wood stove.
Any alternate means of
Oh,
staying.
that's why we got a flat wood stove, because I figured someday we're going to need to cook on it, and we did. It was great.
So you wrote a song about it.
Well, actually, yeah, one day it was good enough that they called school, the Catholic schools, and we actually went into school, and I drove in the back parking lot, and I came in through the door, and as soon as I opened the door, I went, something's changed. It smelled like bacon. And I said, this isn't our school. What's wrong? So I went down the hallway, and as soon as I turned around and faced the cafeteria area, I saw all these National Guard guys there. And I said, there's something going on here. I walked down. My music room is near the cafeteria, and they were in there cooking and getting things ready and taking all these boxes of food out the back door. And So I found out that what they had done is taken St. John's as the center for the cooks to feed all the men that were here. And so, our poor cafeteria lady, there's Janet Waldron, and she's looking at them going, they're in my kitchen. Look what they've done to my butcher block table. She said, what do I do for lunch with these kids? Because they had really cooked. I mean, it's like a big chef, had taken over. It was tremendous the way they had rearranged it. And they heard her. And so they came around and said, don't worry, we'll take care of lunch for you kids. So she just got to talk to them and watch what they were doing and learn their stories. And so by lunchtime, all the little kids are coming through and they're in line with their trays. And the men had soup and sandwiches for them and a fruit and everything was there. And this one little kid goes, are you our lunch lady? It was so sweet. Other ones, the little pre-K kids, were a little bit put off with the uniforms, but within a day, it was fine. Everybody thought they were great. I had some fourth graders come to me after, because they would start their steak and dinner while our kids were still in the after-school program. And steak is cooking, and it's a beautiful, wonderful place. The guys are over there working, and I'm watching them. And I'm in the hallway. These two girls come out, and they said, oh, I got this one's autograph. He's so cute. And she said, and the other one says, well, he put my hat on. And I must have had some look on my face, I don't know what, because she looked up at him and she said, don't worry, Mrs. Pazak, he doesn't have lice. She'd given him her hat and brought it back and checked for lice. Oh my goodness, she knows I care. So we got to know them. They went into my music room and they would, it was carpeted so they could snooze on the floor, and I had television and I had the stereo system and they could use it. They actually finished some homework for my kids. We were researching songs and titles and I came back and it was all done. They were wonderful. So when we found out that they were going to leave, by 8 o'clock the next morning, we all wanted to do something. The school gave them some T-shirts or something, I think. But I wanted to do something. And I went home that night and said, I don't know what I can do. And I drove in that morning, and while I was driving in, I said, well, maybe I can write them a song. And I had the tune to the Dannemora High alma mater in my head for years, because the school was closed, but it was beautiful. I always loved it. Ethel Rogers wrote it, and I said, that's the greatest song. It's too bad the school's closed, the song will die. I said, well, maybe if I could use that song for something. And so I grabbed a small piece of paper and put it on my seat and a pencil, and I started writing The Angels of the Ice Storm. I got it finished to a certain point as I pulled in, and darn didn't I find out they were going to leave earlier than 8 o'clock. So I ran in and I got my guitar and I was trying to put the chords and everything down, and then I looked out and I heard, oh, the bus is getting ready to go. So I left the guitar and I grabbed a piece of paper and I went and I banged on the door of the bus and I said, do you mind, can I just have a minute to sing this song to them? And the guy up in the front gave me one of those microphones they have, in the front of the bus. He said, sure, here, use this. I'm out of breath. They got the most interesting version.
And you didn't have your guitar.
And I didn't have my guitar, so a cappella, here's Lita singing Angels of the Ice Storm for these men. And I afterwards, when I left, and they were all waving out of the bus, it felt good, but it felt very lonely, walking from the bus to the school. And I said, with them gone, everything's going to change. We still have the problem of danger and from the ice storm. Who's going to deal with it? And then I said, well, my kids are going to do it, and their parents are going to do it. We are going to do it because we have to. And then that day, the kids came in and started telling me all these wonderful stories of how they take their four-wheelers and some chains and go put them around trees and pull them out of people's driveways and roads, people they didn't even know, and they're helping people and talking to them and going with their parents with generators to take water out of cellars. It's not the don't speak to strangers, don't smile at a stranger. It was, hey, we can help and we're smiling, and who are you? It doesn't matter, we'll help you anyway. And so I added a verse. So you'll be able to tell the first two verses were the men, and the third verse brings in the rest of us.
I love this song.
In the rugged Adirondack, righteous from the wrong. Smiling angels of the ice storm, keep us close in heart and song. Don't forget the ones who bless you for keeping our North Country strong. Night and day and ever onward, till the time soon came to go. The National Guard, our friends and brothers, our thanks and love they'll always know. Along with caravans of warriors, masters of energy so fine, from miles and miles away they travel to help bring power to the lives. Smiling angels of the ice storm, keep us close in heart and song. Don't forget the ones who bless you for keeping our North Country strong. They came to help our working neighbors, the volunteers we all relied upon. With the power companies, our firemen and women, and unnamed heroes, we will carry on. And we can't forget the strength and courage it took each woman, child, and man to reach out to a needing stranger with a touch, a smile, a helping hand. Smiling angels of the ice storm, keep us close in heart and song. Don't forget the ones who bless you for keeping our North Country strong.
Beautiful, and the North Country is strong, and there's another little piece of history. And as you were singing that, of course, my mind drifted away, as it often does, into what inspires us. I've listened to many interviews with people like Irving Berlin, who, you know, from Alexander's Ragtime Band right up until almost the moment he died, he was writing music.
Right.
And I think about what inspires us. Where does this inspiration come from? Sometimes it's an event, and sometimes it's because you promised somebody you would have a song.
I'm going to do it.
And you write, you know, Lincoln writing the Gettysburg Address, at least legend has it, on the back of an envelope on the train on the
Right.
way, and it turning out to be one of the most powerful speeches in the history of man. Do you ever sit there after you've written something quickly like that and saying, wow, Where did
where
that
did the
come
words
from?
come from?
Where did it come from?
Oh, they've got to come from an incredible source. They come from everything that you know and everything that you've noticed and thought about and some things that you didn't notice. All of a sudden it comes together and you go, it's incredible. I look at that little book and I look at some of the stuff that I wrote way back when, and I go, how was I so smart? I don't know.
And it's, you know, people say,
inspiration comes
people
from
might say, boy, is that vain, a person to say they like what they've done. But that's who we are. And I look at things that I've written and I say, where did that come from? And it's not only, as you described it, from everything we've ever done.
No.
It comes sometimes from
It comes from
the universe.
yes.
I think we're all in tune with each other, and I don't want to wax philosophical here,
think we are.
but I think we do tap. If you open your heart and your mind, you tap into unknown and
Energies.
magical resources.
Yes, you do. And the people that have been here and people who have died, there's an energy. I don't care who other people say. No, you just die and no, they're here. You know, we have the resources of all the people that have ever been. We have the resources of all the people that have been in our families. I think we have a lot of their cell memories. I think things are transferred. And, you know, I pray to the Holy Spirit, you know, give me the words. I'm in trouble here, give me the words. And they come.
And they're there.
So they're there. And how the Holy Spirit does it, I don't know. But there's got to be some
Sometimes
incredible
it's hard
stuff.
for us to question why, because it's such a,
Wow,
it's a
I don't
power
know.
that's so much bigger than anything we can ever imagine.
Well, look at electricity and radio waves and all this other stuff that's invisible to us. Our eyes aren't made to see all that, but it works.
But isn't it neat?
Yes,
Isn't
it
it
is.
neat? I wanted to mention inspiration and creativity because I like to ask those questions of all my favorite people who do beautiful things. And they are in awe. Very often, they know they paid their dues. God knows Lita Kelly has paid her dues, if anybody in the world has paid her dues. But beyond all the practice, all the education, all the experience, there is something beyond that.
There is.
And that creativity, that miraculous creativity is something that we all should be in awe of.
I'm certain that we should. We're given a gift to be able to use it and select, to choose, to twist and turn what's out there.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. We don't really have to, but we do have to respect it. Wherever it comes from, wherever the challenge lies, we're given that gift, and it's a shame if we don't use it.
Yeah, we're still left with a lot of decisions that we can make based on everything, all that input. But I love that one line that I put in that little speech I did about happiness. You can be happy in a heartbeat if you decide to be happy.
If you decide what being happy is.
Yeah.
Some people just look at it as some great big entity.
Yeah.
It's not a big entity.
Every
It's little.
moment right now, what's around us. You have another song before we're going to wrap up the first chapter 1 of the Lita Kelly Pazak story. What's the next one?
This is a song that I like to end my shows with oftentimes, and I'll fit it in there. I didn't write it. My friend Bob Helfant wrote it, and he gave me the rights to use it, and I was so glad. He was from New York City and came up to the North Country, and I worked with him for a while, but he ended up going back to Manhattan. But the North Country didn't leave him. I can remember taking him out to the on an old road up in Lake Placid because he said, I've never really seen stars. I said, okay, we're going to see stars. And it was dark, there were no other lights, and he just sat and the sky unfolded to him. And it became a very, very beautiful essence that belonged to him then. So when he left, he'd sent me a tape of a song called North Star, and he sent it back to me, and I adopted it. And I think it's just wonderful. My son, Jay Lesage, this is a favorite of him. It always has been. He was little when this one came north. Now when we perform together, it has that special keyboard J twist, but it's part of his history. And after the ice storm, this song reminded me of all of us people, all of us, and working together. And the first line is, when you're lost in the dark and you can't find your way, there's nothing smiling back, there's no words to say. It ends up with, how can I tell you? It's all right. Count on me. It's a great count on me song. take that over again. My finger picks are in the wrong place. By the way, that's what these things are. Not artificial fingernails.
I love it.
When you're lost in the dark and you can't find your way, there's nothing smiling back. There's no words to say. How like a child still afraid of the night you are. How can I tell you it'll be alright when you look for your dreams and you can't find one, and you don't try to call 'cause you think no one will come. When stars start to fade like the faces you've known, it's a long way back, such a long way to go. You can count on me, I know where you are. Come home from the sea, I am the North Star. When your nights are so cold that you can't shake the chill, and you need to be touched, and you sit there so still. When rain starts to fall from your eyes to your heart, I tell you I never left. We are never apart. You can count on me, I know where you are. Come home from the sea, I am the North Star. You can count on me, I am the North Star.
May we all find a North Star to guide us wherever we need or want to go. Because as you were talking before you mentioned his name, I said I can't leave this interview without discussing your very talented musical son, Jay. And so you brought his name up and talked about singing this song with him, and I said there are no coincidences. Let's talk about that wonderful son of yours.
Well, Jay right now is working up at Anthony's 3 nights a week, playing piano and singing, and just doing an incredible job of creating. If he started a few months ago when Al Delano retired, Jay took over for him, and it's been a wonderful learning experience for him and for all of us. It's tremendous. He and I started working together at the North Pole again. When he was little, he used to come up and he'd be there for the show, and one of the women who worked there heard him play the piano, and she said, when you're 16, you come on back and we'll put you to work. So when he was 16, I said, well, do you remember what you offered? And she said, I sure do. And so he started to work with me. I was Christmas Carol, and he was Tommy Tucker to our friend Mother Goose. So jaunty cap and the Christmas vest, and he brought his keyboard, and he plays a tremendous guitar too. He started learning that here in the house and wanted to play so badly. I showed him a few things, got him a guitar, and then I didn't have any time to show him anymore. So I'd go upstairs and his door would be closed, and I'd hear these incredible things coming from the neck of that guitar. He was inventing his own chords.
Just like his mommy did.
He was just amazing. So he ended up with some lessons through Bob's Music, and then took it on his own. He can play Eric Clapton. He can just take him and do exactly what he does. He can play guitar and he plays keyboard, and he's got a tremendous voice that developed over time, and he's developing now. It's great. We're going to be playing at the Mayor's Cup for the first time on Wednesday the 9th. We'll be at Trinity Park. It's one of my favorite places to play, and he's never played there before, so we'll be down there from noon to 1:30. Give us a chance to work together again. Now, he used to follow me. I have a feeling I'm going to follow him.
Trinity Park's a very special place for me and for many other people because of the Gold Star Mothers Monument and for many other reasons. It's a huge part of the history of our North Country. But I've also watched that son of yours develop over the years, and I've been amazed by not only the things that he does, but his magnanimous nature, like, once again, like his mommy. I've seen, Calvin and I have been to many North Country musical presentations, and I'll go in there and say, you know, who have you got in the pit orchestra? And they'll say, well, you know, our piano player couldn't show up, or whatever couldn't happen, and, you know, I'll look and there's Jay.
There's Jay.
Getting ready to go, and he's done it so many times for so many shows, and he's bailed out so many productions over the years.
Theater is a good venue for him. Doing the music, it's a great way to use your creativity once more. You have the text, you have the lyrics, you have the people who will work with you, and you get to put it together in a special way. So it's helped him in a lot of ways, and he's helped others, and that's important. It's important. And now he's back at school, at college, and developing even more on his own. We've done a lot of venues together, and he went to Boston and went to Berklee School of Music there for a while, and he learned a lot there, but oftentimes you learn more from the people you're with than from the courses you take. So he's got a vast repertoire of thought and processes and musical interludes there, and they're beginning to really come out.
You know, you mentioned the name Al Delano, and someday I'd love to do Al Delano's life story, because the man has been everywhere and has done everything and has traveled the worldwide making what I think is magical music, because I've known him for well over 40 years, and I've just been amazed at how well he plays and what he does. Just a fantastic guy. And he's played with some pretty highfalutin jazz musicians whom I happen to know from down through the years. And so there's a story that's yet to be told on Hometown Cable.
That's next.
Wouldn't it be a good one?
Get to Al, now how would we do that?
I'll just make him play for 2 hours and a half.
I love it. Yeah.
But that's so neat. And I mentioned that because you mentioned his name, and he played at Anthony's for so long.
And since Jay has been playing, and people of that course are asking me what he's doing, and when I mention that, it's I wish I could tell Al how many wonderful, wonderful comments have come from people who have said that they miss him, and that he added so much to their lives, that he was just wonderful. And so maybe this way, maybe his daughter will see the show, and she can let him know. But he was very, very much appreciated.
Where is he? Did he move?
He's down out in the Midwest somewhere. So I'm going to say, if you're going to do a show, we're going to have to do it like they do sometimes for the awards nights, and get a videotaper out there and do it long distance.
If he ever comes back for a weekend, we're going to nail him, that's for sure.
Oh, yes. Well,
Lita, there are so many other facets of your life that we find interesting. For example, that picture on the wall back there. I didn't know you were that kind of creative. Now, we don't know if Calvin can get up after sitting on that window seat. What is that?
That's a batik. It's you paint with wax on cloth in any place that you don't want the dye to take. So it's like working backwards. Everything you don't want dyed has to be carefully tended to with, they have a janting needle. It's got a little chamber for wax, and if you use either beeswax or paraffin, or a combination of them, depending on how much crackle or how much solid resist you want. You can see I like the crackle. So I put some beeswax and some paraffin in, and I do, where it's white over there, that was my first resist, and then I dipped it into a yellow and then I would do another resist and for a different part of the batik, and then I would dip it into a blue, and then I'd put more on with plenty of paraffin, and once it was solid, you crumble it all up, stick it in the freezer, crumble it a little bit more so that it lets the last dye resist
How
go in.
ignorant I am. I've never heard that word in my life.
Oh, batik, you probably have seen the fabric. There's some wonderful African prints that are done with that technique.
Didn't know what it was.
It's
And you've done,
batik.
how many have you done?
Oh my goodness, I've done a lot. I used to do them for
Many?
Christmas presents.
No kidding.
Yeah, I have them all over the country. It was just
She-
something that I could offer.
she
There's
ex-
another one that I did for Jay's grandmother, and when she died, it was given back to me. I did one for Francine's hanging in Abba's Angels. They're pretty much all over. Some of them have come home, and it's nice to present some of my own things.
You just exude this wonderful talent. It's just great, and it's fun to look at your creations and say, yeah, I did that. That's okay. That's cool.
I appreciate that.
I want to just spend a moment to thank you vigorously for finally allowing us to get together. You and I have shared so many golden moments over the years. We've had some wonderful, profound, and deep conversations about a variety of topics over the years. I've always enjoyed that kind of relationship with you. I've worshipped and admired your talent. But more than that, I worship and admire you as a human being because you're a good person. And now you got to live up to that. No.
Yes, I'm on tape. It's on record. I'm in trouble.
Lita, thanks so much for inviting us into your home for these intimate moments. Calvin and I always enjoy them, and you will invite us back.
Oh, I will. I would love it just to come back and have you sit and listen to the birds and see what we can see with our binoculars in the trees. Just gorgeous.
Maybe a big buck will come walking through the...
Oh, that's
Have you
happened.
seen deer here?
That's happened.
I
The deer have actually come up to the apple tree right outside the door. And the stars, the northern lights, things that we see here, it's so beautifully dark out there. And we'll go and we'll take our binoculars and lie on the deck or on a lawn chair and just hold them up, and it's just tremendous what you can see.
I love it.
It's beautiful.
Can't wait for the next time. Lita Kelly Pazak, Calvin Castine, Hometown Cable, and me, Gordy Little. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.